Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday SMI seminar. I acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the land on which we meet today. On behalf of the Sustainable Minerals Institute, I pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australia and global society. Today's presentation, and welcome Romke, is the role of the mining industry in Chile and its immediate and midterm outlook. And as I said, that's delivered by Romke Kuyvenhoven, who is the productivity lead in the SMI International Center in Chile. Romke is a mining engineer and has worked for companies in Chile, Peru, Brazil, and South Africa. And she joined the center in Chile in 2018. And she's responsible for our portfolio of research and consulting projects in Chile. And those projects are focused on enhancing mine and plant productivity. So those that are online, you will not remember that we have a Q&A session, and you're welcome to click the button on the bottom in Zoom and put your questions in as Romke presents. So if you've got a really good question, pop it in there. And then at the end, I will put those questions to Romke. And Romke, thank you very, very much for making the time late in the evening in Chile to come and present today. And we look forward to your presentation. So over to you, Romke.
Thank you. So we are ready to start. My sound is good?
Yes.
Seeing the first slide?
Yeah,
okay. Okay, there we go. Well, welcome everybody. Good night to my colleagues in Chile. Thanks a lot for having a late night presentation, right? And good morning to my colleagues in Australia, of course. I'm going to talk today about the role of mining industry in Chile and its immediate and middle term outlook. And as a starter, and upon suggestion of some of my colleagues in Australia, I put an image of the actual size of Chile if you would compare it with Australia. And as you can see, in case you thought Chile was a tiny little country somewhere in South America, it's actually not that tiny and especially not little. So this is what I'm going to talk about what has been happening in Chile in the recent past and how things are looking for the future. Chile is the largest copper producing country in the world. There is a list here of the 5 biggest ones. As said, Chile in the first place, then comes Peru, afterwards China in the 3rd position, then USA, and in the 5th position is Australia. So Chile is known to be a copper country. There is more than just copper, especially lithium, molybdenum. However, I think that about 90% probably of the people who work in Chile work in copper mining. This is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at some numbers because I want to somehow explain to you how important the mining industry is in Chile, or maybe it's not that important, and how much does it contribute from different points of view to the economic development of the country. So I'm looking here in the first slide at the employment that is created by the mining industry. As you can see, the direct employment marked in the blue bars is not that significant. It's 2% of the total national. The indirect employment, so through subcontractors and service providing companies, makes it go up until about 10%. And that's the total amount of the contribution of the mining industry to the employment in Chile. As you know, mining is relatively technology intensive if you compare it with other industries such as construction, for example. So that explains the number of about 10%. Now, if we look specifically at the copper production, as you can see, Chile has been producing more or less the same amount of copper over the last 10 years. That is despite of decreasing ore grades. So it's not as if the mining industry is doing exactly the same. However, the rest of the world is picking up when it comes to the role of copper production. And as you can see, between 2010 and 2019, basically the rest of the world increased the copper production by about 30%. So that is significant. It means that Chile is losing a little bit, of course, its strategic position in copper production. Now, if you look at the next slide, this is the one about the fiscal contribution from the mining industry in Chile. As you can see, the fiscal contribution from mining, it's indicated in blue. Well, that is not an awful lot, actually. If you compare it with the other than mining, you can see that the fiscal contribution is somewhere between 5 and 10% of the total fiscal income for Chile. Now, that is what you exactly see here as well. Again, in blue, the fiscal contribution of the mining industry in Chile to the country. So it is about 7% in 2019. On the left-hand side, the y-axis indicates the percentage of the fiscal contribution. I plotted in the same graph the copper price because, as you could expect, the fiscal contribution is pretty much directly related to the copper price, as you can see here. Now, when it comes to the contribution of the mining industry to the gross domestic product, actually there are several industrial activities in this slide. Between 2010 and 2019, as you can see, mining is the blue area on the bottom of the graph. It is somewhere between, well, what is it, 8 and 10%. So on the left-hand side is the actual amount, and on the right-hand side is the percentage. As you can see, the contribution to the gross domestic product has decreased from about 16% in 2010 to what I said, 9% in 2019. So that is significant. That is to some extent good because, of course, the economy is diversifying. But it also means that the importance of mining is becoming a little bit less, at least expressed as you see it here, as gross domestic product. Now, this slide tells you a little bit more, and now we're going to talk a little bit about how mining in Chile relates also to the rest of the world, about the Chilean exports. So as you can see, copper ore, refined copper, actually copper ore, I think it should be copper concentrate, but I copy-pasted this image, to be honest, adds up to about 45% of the total Chilean exports. The country of destination, the biggest one is China, as you can see. The continents are indicated in different colors. After that comes United States, Europe in purple, and then the rest of South America in green. Just responding on a question from Rick Valenta from a few days ago. Rick, the total export in wine is 2.62%. So if we want to diversify a little bit more the Chilean export, then I think my mates in Australia should start drinking a little bit more Chilean wine. And then with respect to the outlook, as things look now until 2024. So what I'm indicating here, what you're seeing here is the portfolio of projects that existed in 2019. There happened quite a lot of things between 2019 and now. I will get into detail later, but of course the social unrest that we had in Chile and then the pandemic that came pretty much straight after that. So it is understandable that there are some changes, and as you can see, the net result is that there are slightly more projects right now registered. It's 49 versus 44 a year ago. However, I would say that the amount that is associated is modest, in the sense that this is the amount of projects that Chile is visualizing, and that is, at least as it says in the indication on the top, we're talking about all the projects of which the pre-feasibility study had started in 2020. So there is growth. That is what I want to show with this slide. However, it is not that significant. Now, when we compare Chile with the other countries in the region, as you can see here, this is the GDP per capita, the gross domestic product per capita. And this explains a little bit of what you might have heard about Chile, about how Chile, some call it the economic miracle of South America. Well, nowadays you shouldn't use those expressions anymore. But as you can see, Chile has had an impressive growth, basically tripled the gross domestic product per capita in the last 40 years. And that is, of course, way more than any other country has done. These data were published in 2019, so they go up to 2018. I would expect, of course, nowadays that the GDP per capita probably is flattening off for the majority of the countries because of everything that has been ongoing in the last 6 to 9 months in the world. And this is another way to look at Chile from an economic point of view. We're looking here at the credit rating. That is basically an indication of how risky it is to invest in Chile, or maybe better to say how attractive it is. So if a country falls into the prime or high grade or upper medium grade category, that means that investments are fairly safe and attractive, and a lot further down you come into areas where you really would want to stay away from, such as the substantial risk and extremely speculative credit ranking. As you can see, I just put in Australia here for a point of reference. Chile and China are sort of at the same level, which is interesting, I guess. Next country in South America that shows up is Colombia. Interesting to see that Colombia is doing relatively well in that context. Brazil has been going down since 2014, as you can see. And then if we look at Ecuador and Argentina, well, that is not actually going that well. And we'll see how that changes, hopefully, in the near future. So when it comes to labor productivity, and this is another aspect that is usually mentioned when we talk about Chile, what I'm showing here is the gross domestic product per hour worked. As you can see, the highest rank on the list is Norway. Afterwards comes USA, and then Australia on a third position. By the way, these rankings that come from the OECD, as is mentioned in the source below the graph, of course, they don't include all the countries from the world. They only include the countries that are slightly better developed, I would say. So you see in black here the average for the OECD countries. Don't worry about the units. It's just a matter of showing how Chile compares with other countries. And as you can see, Chile ranks fairly low. It is less than 1/3 of Norway. Well, there is quite a difference between Chile and Norway, so that might not be that surprising. But if, for example, if you compare Chile with Spain, then still the productivity is less than half. And that is a little bit surprising. And those of you who know Chile probably would agree with me that indeed productivity in Chile is not exactly very high. Now, when we look at the global investment in mining, what we're seeing here, these numbers are from 2020. It mentions those countries that are most attractive for mining investments. So Chile is the biggest one. Afterwards come Brazil and Peru, and then the rest of the world, which of course includes a lot of not such large countries or countries that do not receive a lot of investment, are all in that other half. But Chile is still, in that context, the biggest country for mining investment. So now I'm going to change to a slightly different subject. I'm going to talk about what's happening with water and energy. As we saw in the introduction, from an economic point of view, Chile is an attractive country because of the amount of resources. However, the role of mining in society in general is decreasing a little bit because other economic activities are picking up, which is good from an economic point of view, because of course it makes the country more stable towards fluctuations in mining. But then this is something that deserves some special attention, I think, because there's a lot going on in the legal arena, as I would call it. There are a lot of discussions, initiatives, discussions going on related to water and energy. And I'm not going to get into any detail here, but as you can see, they relate to reformation of the Water Act. We're talking about glaciers, wetlands, conservation, Desalination Act, conservation of biodiversity, Environmental Act that redefines environmental crimes, Energy Efficiency Act, and the Climate Change Mitigation Initiatives. So what I want to say with this slide is that there are a lot of ongoing discussions and legal initiatives that have not come to a final point yet, and of which we don't really know what is going to happen in Chile. And that makes it a little bit tricky, because if you don't really know what to expect, if you could say if the rules of the game are not really clear, well, then it becomes a little bit more risky, because you might not be that sure about what to expect in 5 or 10 years from now. I'm going to look a little bit more at water first. What we're looking here is the continental water consumption. It is expressed as cubic meter per ton of ore. I think this is a good graph. It's nice to see that the continental water consumption is consistently going down, both for concentration plants and for hydrometallurgical operations. If you look at concentration plants between 2012, it was then 0.6. By 2018, it came down to somewhere around 0.35. So that means that the total water consumption by concentration plants has decreased by about 35%. The total continental water consumption, that's what I'm talking about here. And a similar trend is what we are observing in the hydromet. And that is not because there's less copper being produced, because as I showed you in the beginning, the amount of copper that is coming out of Chile is actually stable, rather stable, I would say. So this is because there's more water used from other sources, as you will see here. So we're looking here at continental versus seawater, the future consumption in Chile. So these are estimates. And as you can see, the total amount of water, being that the sum of the continental and the seawater is increasing, is expected to increase between 2019 and 2030. However, the amount of continental water is ever decreasing, and the amount of seawater in percentage is ever increasing. So that is something that is a very positive trend. In case you wonder, of course, the total amount of water that is being used is increasing because the grades of the ore bodies are going down. So for the same amount of copper production, what is required is more and more water, because there are more and more tonnages going through the plant to produce the same amount of copper. So when we look at leach operations, and this is basically leach solvent extraction, electrowinning, what I'm talking about, as you can see here, the overall water utilization is expected to go down. The seawater consumption is sort of picking up. The continental water consumption is significantly going down. The reason that we're seeing this trend downwards is because basically Chile is running out of oxide operations and secondary sulfide operations. So there are less and less leach operations. And that is one of the issues that will come up later when I'm going to talk a little bit more about the plans that Codelco has. Because there's a lot of facilities that are literally sitting there and that are underutilized and that soon might not be used at all, just because there are no leachable ores anymore, not at least at the size of the current mining operations in Chile. So what we're seeing here is, as you could expect, the water consumption or water utilization expressed in cubic meter per second in the concentration plants is picking up, as because what I said, we're running out of oxide ore, we're running out of secondary sulfide ore, and we're starting to hit the primary sulfides that really don't leach that well yet at massive scale. And that means that there's more and more ore going through the concentration plants. Again, what you see here, continental water consumption is more or less stable. And of course, the seawater consumption is expected to increase significantly. Now I'm moving to energy. As you likely will know, especially the comminution part of mining processes is very intensive in energy. But I'm first going to look more specifically about the whole energy balance, if you can say it like that, in Chile in comparison with the rest of the world. And Chile is doing very well when it comes to the utilization of renewable energy. As you can see here on the left-hand side, average for the whole world, 85% of the energy comes from fossil fuels. So basically that's gas, oil, and coal altogether. Very little hydropower, very little nuclear at global scale if you compare it with the fossil fuels. In Chile, only 74% of the total amount of energy comes from fossil fuels. In Chile, we don't have nuclear power. Of course, we have a lot of hydropower. It helps a lot to be right next to the Andes Mountains and have snow on those mountains. So this is the way the non-renewable energy sources are built up in Chile: geothermal, wind, bioenergy, solar, hydropower, and then biomass as well. Now, if we look more specifically about the energy generation, as you can see here, I thought this sentence was actually rather nice, that the power plants that are under development in Chile are basically all renewable resources. That is what the title means to say, without any subsidies, except an endowment of massive sunshine, wind, and water. Well, Chile is in that context a privileged country. The amount of wind, by the way, is not really impressive here, I would say, but the amount of sunshine and water is pretty good. As you can see here, just some clippings from the newspapers. 100%, it says here on the left-hand side, of the electric energy generations that are currently under construction are renewable. And on the right-hand side, it says that the investment in energy projects have been able to revert the downward trend by looking for renewable energy. So that is significant, and that is I don't have any numbers for the rest of the world, to be honest, but I'm convinced that that is a very good thing that is happening in Chile. If we link it now more directly to the mining industry, and I just took a few, I guess, again, headlines from different sources. They are listed on the right-hand side there. For example, the first one says that we are on the way to a more greener mining. Renewable energy will represent 45% of the total energy consumption in mining by the year 2023. BHP is here said that to be switching right to green power for all their Chilean copper starting in 2021. Antofagasta Minerals gets a lot of its energy, a quarter already from renewable energy. Anglo American recently signed a new deal with Enel about renewable energy, and Minera Antucoya, which is owned by Antofagasta Minerals, is soon to be operating at 100% renewable energy as well. So in the mining industry, things are definitely moving in the right direction. So that's about the things that are going fairly well. And now I want to give you a little bit of information about what has happened in Chile in the immediate past with respect to the social outbreak. It would not be good to talk about mining without mentioning what else is going on in the country. So you might remember it was a year and a week ago, on the 18th of October in 2019, Chile literally woke up, I would say. There was a lot of social unrest, lots of protests. It seemed to have started from one day to the other, but honestly, this, of course, is something that was bubbling there for a long time. It's like literally a volcano that exploded from one day to the other, triggered by an increase in the subway prices, but really there was a bottom line that was already indicating that this was soon to happen. And this is just one image. I thought it was nice to show it. Many places in Santiago were like this. Of course, many were suffering from much more massive protests, but basically the idea of this slide is to show you how it just started apparently from one day to the other. Now, this picture is from exactly a month after that social outbreak on the 18th of October. What you're looking at here is I would say, a massive, an impressive, an historic, and very peaceful demonstration. According to the unofficial sources, there were 1.2 million people participating in this protest demonstration. And it all relates to the people were tired, were fed up, were angry, were demanding new systems to come in place, and I will look into that. It's impressive how in such a short time period, so many people, of course, got on the street, and this is a really impressive picture. I think you're looking at Plaza Italia basically covered by people, right, and all the surrounding streets. Then 1 week ago, this is what's happening. 1 week ago was the 1-year anniversary of the social outbreak. And the social unrest that started in October last year basically had been going on October, November, December. I would say that it started slowing down around March because of the pandemic. If you would ask anybody in Chile, or at least if you would have asked anybody in Chile in March, it's not as if any problem were solved in March, but because of the pandemic, there were, of course, much more restrictions. Chile went fairly quick on a complete lockdown. So that's basically what I would say caused the postponement of the demonstrations. A week ago, on the first year anniversary, this is what you saw on the streets. It was a very, I would say, sad and tragic happening, not only in Santiago. These pictures are from Santiago, but all over the country. And 2 churches were put on fire. As you can see here, they were completely destroyed. So definitely there's still a lot of unrest that is out there and that needs to be dealt with. However, yesterday, and I honestly think this is a very nice picture because you only see happy people. We had a referendum this weekend about the new constitution in Chile, and the new constitution. The referendum was about whether you would be in favor or not of getting a new constitution. Well, about 80% of the Chilean population voted in favor of a new constitution. So yesterday it was a very impressive night of celebrations. There was hardly any violence. There were no destructions. Everybody was happy. People celebrating on the street. And that is positive. So nowadays, like today on the street, everybody is optimistic and is confident that things will get better. A week ago, it was completely the opposite because of all the destructions that took place after the first year anniversary. So what is exactly going on then? That explains so much why people are angry. And I'm just going to touch quickly on several aspects. On this slide, you're looking at the income distribution expressed as GDP per capita again. As you see, Chile likes to compare itself with, I would say, first world, very developed countries, and Chile is a little bit far away still, of course, from those countries such as Norway, United States, Iceland, Denmark. And then on the bottom side, I guess that is more relevant. What you're looking at is the distribution of the Gini index. And the Gini index is an indicator that that tells you how equal or how unequal the income is distributed. So in the case of Sweden, Denmark, Norway, to mention the typical 3 Scandinavian countries, the difference between the lowest wages and the highest wages is not very significant. Whereas if you move to the right-hand side of the graph, it becomes more and more unequal. And Chile ranks fairly high. That means that you have a few people who are very rich and a lot of people who don't have a really good income. Now, it's not only about the income inequality. If you look at the costs of education, it is here expressed as the household spending on education as percentage of the GDP. As you can see here, Chile ranks high. The cost of education puts a relatively large burden on the households. Colombia is even higher, and many other countries are lower. Australia is relatively high, I would say as well. But then if you go to the next slide and you look at the household spending on health, again, Chile is one of the highest ones. The only one that is higher is Switzerland. Well, that is concerning if you're approaching Switzerland when it comes to the cost, right? And the other countries, so for example, Colombia, that was very high in the ranking on the total household spending on education, ranks fairly low when it comes to the household spending on health. So this is basically what is behind all this social unrest. It has to do with the income distribution. It has to do with education. It has to do with health. It has to do with the pension funds, but that's a presentation that takes an hour on its own. So I'm not going to talk about the pensions today. So this is basically what is behind all that unrest, okay? Now, moving to a slightly lighter subject, I just want to share with you some information about the business culture in Chile. Now, those of you who have been in Chile will recognize some and maybe be surprised to see some others. This comes from a nice source of information. It's called the Global Portal for Diplomats. So I encourage you to look for the tips and advices for people that visit your own country, and then you find out a lot about what's happening in your own country, I guess. I will quickly go through it. It's a lot. There's a second slide as well. I honestly like the third one a lot. It says punctuality is generally respected and expected, and so is being late. Well, that is sort of confusing. If you're the most important person, then it is okay to be late. If you are not the most important person at all, you'd better be on time. That's, I think, how you should read that. As you see, the fourth one, it says decision-making is centralized. Decisions are made at top level. Yes. So the big boss takes the decision, and from there on, it goes down. If you talk to people that are lower in the organization, you might have a lot of fun, but there will not be a lot of decisions taken. Personal relationships and some light conversation is part of doing the business. That is something that for some Anglo-Saxon cultures is a little bit strange to talk about your spouse and your children, and whereas that is absolutely normal to do in Chile. And then the second slide, just to mention a few, business-like behavior with a bit of humor is appreciated. The second one I like as well, expect to be interrupted. This is not rude, but a way of showing interest and enthusiasm. So if you ever feel interrupted by myself, you know now that's because I'm interested and enthusiastic about what you're telling. Number three is also nice. Feelings and emotions are important in negotiation. Express them. If you don't express your emotions, it's as if you're not, as if you don't really care. And that is something, again, for different cultures, those rules are completely different. So this is quite a challenge, I guess. The fourth one, that's the last one I will read out loud, I think is very important as well. It has to do with the red tape or excessive bureaucracy, as some would say. It can be minimized if you have the right connection. So it's, again, a little bit confusing. There is a lot of bureaucracy in Chile. However, if you have the right context, if you know the right people, and that probably is, of course, the case in many countries, you actually can fast track quite a lot of processes. There is no bribery, by the way, in Chile, not with political institutions, not with government institutions. So I'm not saying here that the right connections means giving money to the right person. Never ever do that in Chile, because then you're in trouble. That's the one thing that all the Chileans agree on, at least when it comes to government organizations. So I think and then the last one I want to outline, expertise is less important than your personal, family, and company background. that is a little bit concerning. I think it's nice to put this into the following context. If you ever are in a meeting in Chile and you have the feeling that the guy that's sitting in front of you is not really smart, well, then likely that's because he's well connected through his family or his friends with the company. And he might very well be not somebody with a lot of expertise, right? And then the top-notch hotel, that's a typical advice, and I agree. You will be judged by your accommodations. If you come to Chile, people will say, which hotel are you staying? Not because they wonder how far you are away from the office, but because they want to know if you're important or not. Because if you're important, you stay at a good hotel, and then people might be interested. So I think it's useful to know. So now I'm going to move into something else, talking about research and development and innovation. That's a mouthful in Chile. I am specifically going to touch on Becas Chile, which is a program that many Chileans who want to go abroad to do a master's or a doctorate study, right, a PhD study, know. Now that program, Becas Chile, has been suspended for 2021, for next year. And numbers that you're looking here on this slide are the numbers, the total numbers, so the sum of the scholarships as awarded between 2008 and 2020. So that is the last 12 years. Just to highlight some, there's a lot of information in this slide. I realize that large majority on the right-hand side, the blue-gray bars, chooses a master's or a PhD program. The countries where most people go from Chile, Great Britain, USA, Spain, and Australia. As you can see, there are slightly more scholarships than scholars because some students get a scholarship to do a master's and then stay on and do a PhD afterwards. So some people you can get basically the Becas Chile scholarship twice. And if you look at the field of study, social sciences, of course, that includes business and economy as well, basically takes up about 45% of all the scholarships, and then it's distributed fairly evenly between natural sciences, humanities, and engineering, and a minor proportion for medicine, health, and agriculture. When it comes to expenditure in research and development, comparing to some other countries as percentage, again, of the gross domestic product, while Chile is low in comparison to a lot of other countries, and that is concerning. I think Finland is a good example of a country that, of course, heavily invests in research and development. Now, these are the national numbers for those countries. So it's not only in mining. However, Finland used to have a quite significant mining industry and is now, of course, completely turned into a technology providing mining industry, to put it that way. Whereas Chile is still very much a mining country based on production. So Chile is ranking low. If you compare it, for example, with China, it has had impressive growth, I would say, similar to Finland, percentage-wise, between 1996 and 2016. Australia is moving somewhere around 2% nowadays, according to this source, which is the World Bank. So it is correct, and it is concerning that the research and development spending in Chile is so low. This is absolutely something that is, I would say, negatively outstanding, in case that expression exists. It should be higher. It should be way higher. Chile should aim to be somewhere between 1% and 2% of GDP, I would hope, in maybe 5 or 10 years from now. So now I'm going to talk about 3 different companies, and I just want to show to you by these slides what can be found on the public domain. So this is all public information. This specific slide information comes from the annual report from Codelco 2019. And Codelco distinguishes between disruptive innovation and incremental innovation. Well, incremental innovation, I think some of us would call that operational excellence or operational improvement or continuous improvement. Those are really, I would say, technical issues. On the side of disruptive innovation, as you can see, there are a lot of issues going on or basically on the radar that are valid for many other companies as well. What surprises me a little bit is the last, and I certainly hope not least, item on the left-hand side, 7, water and tailings, as if water and tailings can just be squeezed together like that. I think it's a little bit surprising that there is not that much innovation here shown in the field of sustainability, of social responsibility. And I know that there are changes going on. It has been announced, and I hope to see a different listing, I would say, in a few years from now when it comes to the innovation initiatives in that sense. Then again, public domain, in this case, Antofagasta Minerals, what is mentioned as the priorities in innovation. In case you wonder why I'm talking about Codelco and Antofagasta Minerals, is because those two are Chilean companies. There are many other mining companies in Chile, like Anglo or BHP, or however, Teck, Goldcorp, and well, many have gone through different mergers recently, right? But Antofagasta Minerals and Codelco are the only Chilean companies that are operating in Chile. All the others is foreign-based mining houses. So Antofagasta Minerals is talking also about tailings management, low-grade ore processing. As you can see, 3rd position, energy efficiency and renewable energy, mass mining, social impacts of mining, and automation and robotization. So this is what is, as I say, it's on the public domain, and I think this is a good guideline, same as the list for Codelco, about what are the issues that those two companies are looking at. Now, when we look at Collahuasi, which is a Chilean operation, it is owned by Anglo-American, by the way, Glencore and Mitsui, but it is a full Chilean operation. There is not a real strategy, of course, for innovation, because that is done by the companies that own the operation. However, there is a nice amount of attention on the public domain given to sustainability and to the communities. And as you can see here, there's a lot of, I think, areas in common that many large institutions in the world are working on, SMI as well, from Australia and from Chile, such as, by means of example, indigenous people, heritage and culture, and the contribution at regional level, just by means of example. So that is with respect to the mining companies. And now I wanted to show you this slide. I like it a lot, actually, because you might think that you're looking at a wind farm at sea, right? And what is surprising, though, is that this wind farm is owned by Shell. And Shell used to be the largest oil company in the world. And interestingly, Shell is moving away from fossil fuels, basically became or is on its way to become the energy provider, and is moving into more renewable energy sources. And that is a very bold move, I think. It means a lot of changes, of course, but I just mention it because oil, such as copper, is a non-renewable resource. And somehow Shell is reinventing their business game and moving towards renewable. And that is a totally different story, of course, requires completely different skills and disciplines. But it is a nice example of how companies can evolve and basically redefine their business. So when we look at copper, again, what will happen in the future if you were expecting me to give you a list of 5 or 6 aspects? Well, you will not be getting them. It's something that has to be done internally. I will explain it in the following slides as well. There are 2 things that are relevant. Number 1 is that the industry will have to be, of course, become greener and greener, more environmentally friendly, more sustainable. So it doesn't really matter if the copper comes from recycling, such as is the case in Europe, a lot of urban mining is being used there, or if it comes from the primary sources, such as in the case of Chile, where there still are a lot of mining operations. What matters is that the industry has to contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals as defined by the United Nations. And again, I'm not going to explain all these sustainable development goals. If you don't know them, well, you better Google them. You have to know them if you work in an industry that is so energy intensive. It comes down to whatever the way your metals are produced, it has to be done in such a way that we are contributing to increased sustainability. Now, getting things a little bit together and at the same time taking one step sideways, I want to show you quickly how we can bring together everything we've seen in these last 43 minutes, according to my watch here. Imagine that there are two aspects that we have to consider. Number one is the level of control that you can have over what you're doing. So one extreme is control, the other extreme is the complete absence of control. The other aspect is certainty. So one extreme is complete certainty, the other one is uncertainty. You've heard me use the word game a few times. So basically, if we talk about certainty and we talk about the absence of control, we can call that quadrant the rules of the game. For example, Chile is a country with a lot of earthquakes. We know that for sure, but we can't control it. It's a good example of the rule of the game. If you want to be in Chile, well, there are earthquakes. Then if you look at the area that links the absence of control with the uncertainty, well, another example would be, okay, we know we have earthquakes, but we don't know when they will take place or how what the magnitude will be or where they will take place, right? Then the third quadrant, then we come into the area where we say, okay, we have an uncertainty, but we have certain level of control. So for example, if I have a metallurgical laboratory, I could decide to install that in an area that is relatively safe, even if there is a big earthquake. However, if I'm talking about a mine site, well, they usually are high up in the mountains, so there's not a lot to choose. But basically, you have the option, depending on the type of business you're in, to choose a location that is relatively safe. And then when it comes to making decisions, well, that is basically the strategy that you would apply, right? So you would strategy would be that all your facilities are earthquake proof, right? Or a strategy would be that you never go into a building with more than 4 floors, just by means of example. So this is basically the matrix. As I say, this was developed by Ilbury and Center. It's extensively explained in the Fox Triology, interesting book that we are moving in. So I'm now going to put in what we have seen so far. So when it comes to Chile, when it comes to mining, well, the rules of the game, the certainty we have, and we have no control, is that Chile is a mining country. It produces a lot of copper. We are facing water scarcity. There is a lot of energy. The energy prices are relatively high. There are interesting R&D and innovation initiatives by the major mining firms. And as you could see, there is still a lot of inequality and hence social unrest, right? So on the left-hand side, and of course, it's a blur line between those two. When we move to the uncertainty, well, we don't know what's going to happen with Becas Chile. We don't know if the social unrest is over anytime soon. We don't know what will happen with water and energy legislation. And then when it comes to the options and the strategy, I will elaborate a little bit more on that in the next slide. As you can see here, some other aspects that haven't been mentioned because I'm already past the time and I want to make sure that you have this in mind when you think about the mining game in Chile. We can be certain and have no control over the fact that business culture in Chile is usually based on distrust. There is bureaucracy, people tend to be risk adverse, and there is increased social resistance to mining. So what might happen, and we cannot control it, is that we could be facing a brain drain. The smart people might want to leave the country, right? The more privileged ones. On a more social level, I would call it the eat the rich phenomena, right? People don't like you because you have a good job or because you have a good income. There might be decreased mining activities. And there are a lot of others: new constitution, economic outlook, public funding, what will happen with COVID. So then we get into the field of the options. And just by means of example, whether you're a mining company or an engineering company, you could diversify or specialize, right? You could decide to grow your business either organically or through acquisitions. You might want to go to hybrid technologies, just as Shell is doing. using fossil fuels and renewable sources. Redefine the business as usual and scenario planning, scenario evaluations. What if the pandemic will be with us for the next 3 years? What if we have a big earthquake? And exit planning. Exit planning is also important at the corporate level and is also important at business unit level. It's not about, I'm going to leave the country as a company. Exit planning is also about looking at your different lines of business and saying, okay, is this something that we want to do? Is it giving the return that we expect? Well, if not, you might want to exit that line of activity and do something else, right? So the decision or strategy that you could take, for example, is act local, be global. I like to say that is very important to do in Chile. They have to feel you're one of them, but you have to be global at the same time. Strategic partners. In a country like Brazil, you get nowhere if you don't have a local strategic partner. And then select, of course, the best team, given all these uncertainties and rules and options that we have to actually play the game. And with that, I come to my final slide. What we're talking about is, and everyone has to define that for himself, and I'm happy to discuss further, of course. You might want to look at what the actual game is that you're playing, what the actual business game is that you're playing. And you have to be sure that you know what exactly the rules are. And then you have to make sure you have the right players, right? And then you have to play the game. And very important, make sure you have fun. You evaluate the outcome. And then most likely you might want to redefine your game, because this is an ongoing process. Society changes and businesses will as well. And with that, I come to the end. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to take some questions.
Right, Romke, thank you very, very much for your presentation. We have a couple of questions online. We've also got, I think we've got about 5 minutes for those, 5 minutes for those questions and a bit of a wrap up. So I'll dive into those questions quickly. I think a number of them you've probably picked up on. I was having a look as you went through the presentation. So the first one is, person suspects that the drop in fiscal contribution of mining to Chile is largely the result of difficult legislative framework in Chile towards mining.
Well, yes and no. Definitely the legal uncertainty is something that demotivates company of further increasing their investment. However, those that are already in Chile are not going to abandon everything that has been invested just because the legal climate is becoming a little bit more uncertain. So I think the uncertainty more affects the attraction of new investment and not so much the actual operation of existing companies, but it is to some extent related as well. But it's more than just the decrease.
Right, and then you picked up on the recent referendum and in your experience, and what do you think the impact will be on mining activity?
I think everybody expected the referendum to have a positive outcome for those who want a new constitution. So I think the companies will have built in that effect already. It was not a surprise, to be honest. They had about a year time to build it in because the referendum was decided on about 11 months ago. The referendum is nothing more than the rules of the game. The referendum is not going to redistribute income or is not going to change the health or educational impact or the costs associated on the household. However, maybe Chile is having a little bit old-fashioned rules of the game and would benefit from an update. But the constitution doesn't go any further than that. Then still the people will actually have to make it work. So there will not be a real direct impact. It will take years before you would be able to say, wow, now that with this new constitution, Chile definitely is attracting more mining investment. That's a long shot. I don't see that happening too soon.
All right, there are two questions on energy. The one is the potential of geothermal energy.
Yes.
Do you see any, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm not really an expert on geothermal energy. Yes, of course, there is potential for that. However, there are limited locations where geothermal energy can be used, as far as I know. And given the amount of snow, given the altitude differences in Chile, and given the amount of sunshine in basically half of the country, those energy sources always will be very attractive, and I would expect them to be much more massive than geothermal. I'm not sure how massive geothermal energy can become. It's definitely not massive at the moment. So I'm not exactly the right person, but I think there will be an increase, but it will never be the major player.
Right, and then the next question is really just having a look at copper production in Chile becoming green, and if so, how will it happen? And then there's a follow-up one here, which I think probably have to come back to the person on is, so how does the copper industry compare to aluminium?
Oops, yeah. Well, the first one on green copper, to be honest, copper is a commodity, and the commodities are traded. It's not like fair trade coffee, right? It's not like it is a commodity. So I think that it's difficult to. I know that mining companies are working on the traceability of the copper. So you could talk about fair trade cobalt, because we know that in Congo there's a lot of things going on that are not really good when it comes to the people and respect of human rights in the cobalt production. But distinguish between Chile, between different sites from greener or less greener copper, it's a little bit difficult. And the ecological footprint of the mining activity is so complex. It involves everything. It involves the manufacturing, it involves the shipping. The production is only really a minor part of all that. So it's a good initiative, but it's very complex. And with respect to aluminium, well, to be honest, I don't know a lot at all about aluminium. I think that's a good question. I think that's what you're supposed to answer if you got a question that you don't have the answer to. So I think that's a good question, and I would like to get back to that later when I've spoken to colleagues who can help me.
All right, and then another one is, what is the role of, well, what role could R&D play in the development of mining in Chile for the future? And this is particularly about what can be done in terms of collaboration with Australian institutions, probably like ourselves, and industry and research centers in Chile.
Well, it is an interesting battle, and you and I, Neville and Rick, we are dealing with that battle on a daily basis. I think that Chile has so many good primary resources that there is no real need to get into a high level of research and development. It's something that, of course, is something very relevant for the future, as you have seen in Finland, you've seen it in Australia now. There are other companies in Cornwall. There are excellent universities, and the mining industry basically is really minimized by now there. I think that as long as in Chile there is such a high level of activity related to primary resources, it's so attractive to work there that it's difficult to get people really excited about doing research and development. I think legislation plays a major role there, and of course all the legislation related to sustainability, because nowadays, I mean, linking in with the other question, whether copper is green or not, the mining company makes good money and the people have a good income. So if there are no legal incentives to spend more on research and development, then it won't happen that easily. I see it as a legal challenge more than a technical one.
All right, Romke, we've got probably 5 seconds for the next question, and I just want to squeeze it in. There are a couple of others online, which I think we'll come back to in terms of answering people their questions. We'll come back to them online. But the last one is, what do you think the impact of the worldwide EV revolution will have on Chile? And it's really looking at supply of, I suppose, copper and lithium.
Well, oh, hang on. I have now 3 seconds left. Yes, there will be tremendous impact. Chile is a country that has a lot of important resources, lithium, copper, and of course, cobalt in a much lesser extent. Ask the people from Shell how they feel about moving from fossil fuels to wind energy. I think we're facing something similar. There will be changes around the corner rather soon.
I think there's probably a topic there for a further conversation, particularly around the energy space and renewables.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for joining our Tuesday seminar. We really appreciate the team in Chile, and we're really grateful that you're connecting with us and working with us closely, and thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
So, for me to wrap up, what we've decided as a team is that we would end our SMI Tuesday seminar series today at the end of the month, and take a break over the December holidays, and then come back in the new year, and we'll have another seminar series. The JKMRC seminars will continue on Friday, so those are Rick's, and those will be publicized on the website. And then, as per usual, please keep an eye on our website. We will be posting, if we do have guests that are available to give talks, we'll post them on our websites for those that can make them. So, Rick, over to you.
I just wanted to say one thing, that in addition to that, this Thursday at 2:30, we have a GSQ UQ webinar highlighting 4 innovative exploration companies working in Queensland. And if you just do an internet search on GSQ UQ webinar, it'll come straight up.
Thanks, Rick. And
can I say one final thing? In case people would like to have a copy of the presentation, I'm happy to share that. You can find me rather easily on LinkedIn. There are not too many Romkes in Chile, so just reach out to me and I will make sure you get a copy.
Romke, thank you very much. And of course, there will be a recording on the SMI website. So thanks, everybody. And thank you very much for the seminar series this year. It's been hugely successful and we've really enjoyed your company. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.